Dune Awakening's Harkonnen build set is far from the easiest thing to use. An insectoid amalgamation of blackened plastone and harsh steel, it can be difficult at times, but today I've got 5 tips to help you get more out of the Harkonnen set and create some beauty from the monotony. So, let's get into it. Firstly, let's tackle the easy stuff, combinations. Harkonnen has a few different sets that it can work with to a reasonable degree. Chome Observer is a big hitter in the combo game. It suits the Harkonnen set really well and adds a lot of value. Observer was attained through Twitch drops initially, but they're now available from the base vendor in both social hubs, so you can pick these pieces up easily if you have the Solari to spare. Aside from Observer, Chome Facility also works fairly well as a contrast material. You do have to kind of be careful where and how you implement it, but black and white is a classic combo. Smuggler can work too. Smuggler is very heavy on the light, whereas Harkonnen aims for kind of the opposite. There is a little bit of stylistic disconnect. It's also a lot more industrial, which is a vibe that can suit Harkonnen, but doesn't always gel. That being said, there are some ways to get the Smuggler set to work with Harkonnen, and if your design can accommodate those windows from Smuggler, I think it adds quite a lot of value. Lastly, the Atreides set can work quite well, but again you do have to be careful how you integrate the two. Generally speaking, when you mix these sets, I think it's better to have one dominant material, like Atreides, with some slight Harkonnen accents, or vice versa. A 50-50 mix can work sometimes, but I've always found it a bit more successful with the approach I just mentioned, and it's the same tactic I've used on my own main base to fuse the two sets together, mostly Atreides with just a bit of Harkonnen. Now in terms of what doesn't work, Chome Shelter just isn't the vibe. It doesn't really suit the style of Harkonnen. Dune Man is a little better, but for me I'm not a huge fan of how it looks. Good builders might be able to get something good out of it, but it's definitely a weak combo in my eyes. In summary, Chome Observer and Facility work well, Smuggler and Atreides too, though with a couple more caveats. Dune Man is weak but could potentially work, and Chome Shelter is just a no-go in my eyes. Now, onto the next tip. One of the biggest weaknesses in the Harkonnen set is how it all blends together. If you're not careful, you're going to end up with one big blob of dark stone and metal, and that just doesn't work. Other sets can benefit from nuance because they don't all blend together as much, there's a lot of tonal contrast, but Harkonnen isn't that. A lot of detail gets lost even at a moderate distance because everything is the same tone. You want to instead craft a build with strong, defined core shapes that create a strong silhouette and a clear structure to the build. To prove that point, I'd love to show you one of my own builds, but I think it's only right we look at one of the best Harkonnen builds I've ever seen, the Harkonnen Industrial Complex by Fifi. The build is sensational, and whilst it makes use of many advanced tricks, the core of it is fantastic use of core shapes. Each major segment of the build can be picked out at the blink of an eye, there's no confusing multi-layering that meshes different parts together, and the use of negative space with the walkways aids in defining those denser segments that would otherwise get lost had it all been built up into essentially one big block. Whilst this build is an example of some of the best, the core principles of shape and structure can be extracted and implemented into almost every single build. It doesn't have to be something as complex as this, it can be rather simple, something you can just draw out. A pyramid with extended boxes, one large box and one smaller, a triple peak, there's lots of different possibilities. You can use all the fancy tricks in the world, but without good use of strong shapes, the Harkonnen set will inevitably blend into a dark blob. Don't rely on the minutiae of fine details or slight differences that may work with sets like Atreides, focus instead on strong core shapes first, and you'll have the building blocks of success. On to tip number 3. One of the biggest internal problems with the Harkonnen set is just how flat everything can get. The plain steel walls aren't the most interesting, but if you're building box rooms, things get incredibly boring incredibly quickly. However, this can be avoided with careful use of roof pieces. Let's take this room for example. Pretty standard stuff, but it's horrendously plain and boxy. However, by using roof pieces, we can easily smooth out those harsh boxy edges. You have 2 options in this regard. The first is ramp pieces from the inclines menu, which I think is the easiest option. You can either use the full or half ramps to smooth out that harsh transition between the wall and the roof, adding a simple, gentle slope to help buff those harder spaces out. Of course, you can use corners, inverted corners and so on to wrap this around the room, which ends up with quite a nice look. You can also do this with regular roof pieces, which looks a lot nicer on the interior, but also requires a bit more work. Unfortunately, the curved roof pieces do clip through the floor above, so if you want the next floor up to not be bobbled by these roof accents, you need to hang a half wall from the ceilings and then hang the roof pieces off of those. This is much better for taller builds, as doing this on a 2-tile high room can make things feel quite cramped, but the aesthetics are unmatched. The rounded shape really helps to style out the rooms and give everything a lot more flow. Using ramps or roof pieces, this simple trick can really help the Harkonnen set. On to tip number 4, the Harkonnen set's main unique pieces are the tall ramp walls and the accompanying wall triangles. These are entirely unique to this set, and you can use them to great effect to branch out from your build with entirely different shapes, or using them to shape out otherwise boxy portions of your design. They are a little finicky to use, you'll get used to them, but you can also use the large wall triangles to square off the faces, so you can include standard items like pentashields, gateways, and so on. For a set that is often very boxy, these tall ramps are perfect for breaking up those boxes with slanted shapes, and it's something that a lot of other sets just can't replicate. Another unique feature Harkonnen does really well is domes and curved roofs. A lot of the other build sets have rounded pieces, but they're fully realised in this set as large dome pieces and rounded roofs. These items are perfect for adding shape atop your build, helping to barrel off longer segments, dot domes around your design, and just generally aiding in helping to augment the shape of Harkonnen as a whole. On the topic of roofs, a quick tip that my Conan Exiles viewers will be very familiar with: if you have enough headroom, you can use walls and wall triangles to build roof risers, which add a ton more personality to the Harkonnen set. This is made much easier as of Chapter 3, as you can now extend your land claim without having to worry about paying extra tax. This tip works best on circular structures like towers, but you can use it on squares and rectangles too with the right approach. The only thing you can't use them on are the rounded wall pieces. The final tip, number 5, is about lighting and how Harkonnen interacts with different sources. Most light sources in Dune Awakening make up one of 2 tones, warm or cold. Unlike Atreides and the other sets, Harkonnen can be vastly changed depending on which tone of lighting you choose. The standard warm lights that most sets have access to work quite nicely with Harkonnen, especially on the interior. It helps to lift up the coldness of the steel, and whilst it perhaps doesn't feel as homely as Atreides or Chome Shelter, it does add that little lift that Harkonnen really benefits from. Conversely, the cold lighting is insane for augmenting this build set. I believe I've shown this in a couple of builds before, but in the right settings, like nighttime, the cold lighting can just suck all of the colour and warmth out of Harkonnen, almost looking like you're playing in a sort of cold-tinted grayscale world. This is perfect for the Harkonnen aesthetics, and when you use it right, it's an incredibly oppressive atmosphere. And there we have it: combinations, shaping, interior smoothing, unique pieces, and lighting. 5 tips you can use to make the Harkonnen set much better. Thank you for watching. The Harkonnen set is definitely a bit harder to use than something like Atreides, and to be honest, I think that usability gap is fairly large. Hopefully these tricks help you to get even more value out of the Harkonnen set, and if there are any tips or tricks you like that I didn't include here, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Don't forget to check out the Patreon to get content early, blueprint downloads, video credits and more, and take a listen to my music project Sanctite Prayer. The link to both is in the description. On that note, a massive thanks to our YouTube members and patrons for continuing to support the channel. Again, thanks for watching, take care, and I'll see you soon.